I begin this morning with a poem from who you may have come to know as one of my favorites, David White. It's called The Lightest Touch. He says, good poetry begins with the lightest touch. A breeze arriving from nowhere, a whispered healing arrival, a word in your ear, a settling into things. Then, like a hand in the dark, it arrests the whole body, steeling you for revelation. In the silence that follows a great line, you can feel Lazarus deep inside the laziest, most deathly afraid part of you lift up his hands and walk toward the light. I've been taken this week by the life and story of Glenn Campbell. I found the documentary on Netflix this week. Actually, it was a week ago today in the evening. Christy and I were home and thought we might find something interesting to watch on Netflix, and I saw that and I thought, let's watch that, because I always loved Glenn Campbell's music, and it occurred to me after watching it how sad I felt that it probably wasn't the right thing to watch late on a Sunday night. I encourage you to watch that documentary if you've not seen it. The story, as you know, is of this musician, this singer, this guy from Delight, Arkansas. Makes it big thanks to the Smothers Brothers who put him on their summer series, and he has his own show. He sings some hits, sings the words and music of Jimmy Webb, who can write a song. Does great, makes it big, is in True Grit with John Wayne, goes through this incredible career of musicianship, a guitarist par excellence, working for years with the Wrecking Crew, the studio session musicians that played on more hits than you could imagine, but in more than a few recordings of music that's not country in the least, including the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. That's Glenn Campbell on guitar. And like any of us, as we live our lives, we go through this season of ups and downs, ebbs and flows, and for him that involved marriages failed in no small part due to his own addiction issues, cocaine and alcohol. Finding at last someone with whom he would spend the last 30 so years of his life. And living off the Rhinestone Cowboy era songs, you know, the guy could make a living. And then it was in 2011 that he announced publicly what any of you who know and have lived with anyone with this disease, that before it's ever said out loud, you've observed the symptoms for a long time, that he is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. And the documentary picks up at this point, this farewell tour, and what it looked like for him to be able to get up on stage, and some nights make it great, and then some nights struggle through. And what it looked like for him, amazingly, to be able to get on stage and perform, and yet to navigate life itself seemed difficult. And he recorded the music. He recorded one more final studio album, and then there's a soundtrack to this documentary. And then I found this week this re-recording that he did in like 2013 after the final tour was done, where he went back and recorded the major songs of his career, but very differently, and now with a voice that's in its upper 70s but can still get it done. And you hear Wichita Lineman sung by a guy that had sung it all of his life, but he was singing it as if he knew he was singing it for the last time. That's just been all over me all week. I've chatted with John about it. I've talked with some other friends about it. But that story has just gotten all over me this week, and I've tried to figure out why. And maybe it's because I see a man that age living through what he's living through, and he's just a couple of years older than my own father, and so maybe I see that, and I'm projecting into that, or maybe it's because I grew up knowing that music was in my house as a kid, and here it is, one more example of someone that was a part of my childhood that's not there anymore. I mean, I get to anymore where I can't even watch the immemorial reels at award shows because there's my life passing away. So I have lived with this thought this week around this and this reading for the day, and given what this day is, about the value, the thing about memory. The story is now for Glenn Campbell, now several years down the road from when this documentary was filmed, but he's now in a care facility, and his wife reports that he really cannot understand any language anymore. It's what you live with and deal with this disease that many of you have seen. And I have pastored more than a few families with it, especially at the place I came back here from. What is it about the power, the value of memory? And what has that to do with this occasion, All Saints? Because of all the things today is, it is not Memorial Day. That doesn't mean we don't remember people in our lives. You can't help but not remember them. But we also remember them within the context of all who have gone before, who stand as the great cloud of witnesses for the church, who have lifted up and carried the faith, and we are their heirs. It's not Memorial Day in that kind of way. It's not like we're having a church funeral again for everybody. No, today is something that is very different. It's something else. It is about those who have been long before we were, as much as it is about those whose lives raised us and pointed us toward the very faith that we claim now. It's about the truth that in life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. And into this moment comes this story of which we really only capture the last half of this larger narrative in John around the raising of Lazarus. But you get to the point of the story as Jesus enters where there is clear grief and anguish over the death of one well-loved, one who was also known and well-loved by Jesus himself. And it is always the case in John that anything that John will say about Jesus, it is always to make clear that the reader knows that this is the one in whom, this is the one who has sent, this is the one who is, this is the one who is the Christ. And every action he performs validates that. And Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb and into life. And yet, before that moment occurs, there's the reality of witnesses and all who are observant and of family members of how can this be? Because you roll back the stone from Lazarus' tomb, And while maybe all you can see is darkness inside, it is the stench of death that overwhelms. And you know what that smells like. It is the stench of death that pervades real life. It is the stench of death that also exists within the dark recesses of the tombs of our own being, you and I. Those places within each of us that we have a stone in front of that no one better ever roll back. You and I, we all have our things that we want to protect, hide, the vaults into which everything behind which can never be known, and there is a stone in front of it. And on the other side, that stench is not one wants to live with. Today is a day in which we can well be reminded, assured of what is true. That of all the things this day is about, it is also about this. That even now, right now, there is one who stands outside the darkest tombs of our being, where the gangrenous stench of death overwhelms, and yet that one calls us by name to come out of that tomb and into the light. This morning, we give thanks to God for those in our lives who are among the cloud of witnesses who have shown us who we are and who we can be. We give thanks to God for the witnesses who have lived and served in this church across her history, who over the last month you've had opportunity to hear stories about. We give thanks to God for those first witnesses of long ago who bore up the faith and carried it forward. And we give thanks to God who through Jesus Christ right now can call us to life from the dead, stinky places within each of us. For that one can call us by name. And I have a strong sense that even for someone like Glenn Campbell, who can no longer understand language, he can hear the voice of the great shepherd call him home. Thanks be to God. Amen.